Please welcome to the stage President and CEO of the National Marine Sanctuary Foundation, Kris Sarri.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Kris Sarri. I'm President and CEO of the National Marine Sanctuary Foundation, and welcome back to Capitol Hill Ocean Week. We are so glad to have you here in person, and thank you to everybody who's joining us online. I'm just going to admit one thing. I'm a little rusty. It's been 2 years since I've been up in front of a podium, and a little nervous. I think all of us are a little, so thank you very much for joining us this morning. So for the past 2 years, of course, we've held Capitol Hill Ocean Week, something we affectionately call CHOW, as a virtual program. And from that experience, we've found that no matter where CHOW is held, this community can come together for impactful, insightful, and energizing discussions about the future of our blue planet. We live in a world now in which access to events such as CHOW is possible from many more places through technologies that emerged during the pandemic. And we're taking full advantage of that today and going into the future. So for this reason, we're really proud to have our first hybrid CHOW with people attending both virtually and in person, and also speakers attending in person and virtually as well. At the National Marine Sanctuary Foundation, our mission is to connect people to our oceans, coasts, and Great Lakes, and to inspire stewardship and a lifelong devotion for their care and their protection. We invite people with a stake in the health of our planet to work with us to protect it, and Capitol Hill Ocean Week is a major part of that effort. We hope that the ideas and the solutions we discuss here will find a receptive audience down the avenue on Pennsylvania Avenue, in a corporate boardroom, and at a state capitol or a city council. CHOW is an enormous undertaking that we cannot possibly be done alone. So we have a lot of people and organizations to thank, including my staff at the National Marine Sanctuary Foundation. First, we'd like to express our appreciation for our signature sponsors, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration and the David and Lucille Packard Foundation. NOAA is an agency that enriches our lives through science. Their reach goes from the surface of the sun to the depths of the ocean. And NOAA is a fantastic partner to the foundation. They've always been a champion of CHOW, and we really thank them for their support. I also want to thank the David and Lucille Packard Foundation, whose work focuses on addressing climate change, gaining knowledge through science, and supporting local communities to ensure a better future for our ocean. Thank you to our presenting sponsors, the Gordon and Betty Moore Foundation, whose support for scientific discovery and environmental conservation is helping to protect a healthy and resilient ocean ecosystems, and to the Curtis and Edith Munson Foundation, which supports a wide range of marine conservation across the United States and around the world. This morning, we're very honored to have Chairman Francis Gray of the Piscataway-Conoy tribe join us to offer a traditional welcome. With that, let me turn the podium over to Chairman Francis Gray.
Nule Liptam Alipak Ki Kayayu Mi Nuk Mi Tukwe Oak Ni Kai Nukwe Nay Pei Wat Nishi. Welcome. I'm glad to see you here today. To my elders and my ancestors who have walked in front of me, I thank you. Welcome to my ancestral homelands, the homelands where the Creator has placed the Piscataway people for over 10,000 years and continuing as of today. This sacred land upon which we walk today is the same land my ancestors walked, cared for, and where they now rest, and hopefully they rest in perpetuity. We, the living Piscataways, and our future descendants honor our ancestors by thriving and striving to protect both today and into the future. We are Piscataway. We are the people from where the waters blend. We consider Mother Earth a living entity. The Potomac, the Patuxent, the Chesapeake are three of just her small arteries. The Mattawoman, the Nanjamoy, the Occoquan, Piscataway, the Portaback, the Pamunkey, the Wikibikamico, the Mattaponi, and many others are her veins that complete her circulatory cycle. Our Mother Earth gives us life. We, the Piscataway-Conoy, must protect Mother Earth in terms of perpetuating her many gifts for the future of the unborn, as opposed to the vast consumption-based mentality and exploitation of our natural resources. We, as Piscataways, share a common philosophy with our natural world. Our traditional indigenous knowledge emphasizes the respectful use of our waters. It is within our historical as today's responsibility to protect and preserve for our descendants, as well as all life forms, to include the two-legged, the four-legged, the winged, those that swim and crawl. The precious gift of clean water for our use today, as well as for countless generations of time in the future. Thriving populations of bald eagles, herons, beavers, river otters, deer, turtles, numerous aquatic species call this area home, and we consider them our relatives. We honor our ancestors by continuing to speak for our relatives from the natural world that relies upon us to protect them, their habitat, and today and into the future. We, individually and collectively, are responsible to ensure our actions, decisions, support Mother Earth and all of the creations whose daily existence depends upon clean waters and the natural landscape. We affirm our indigenous ways and the views that the earth is our true mother who gives us birth and maintains all life. So let us ask the Creator to help guide our steps and give us courage so that we're able to see the truth on this circle of life that we have chosen. Help us bring into balance our mental, spiritual, and physical being so that we are able to know our place here on earth. Give us the wisdom so that we're able to make wise choices which are placed in front of us. May we thank Mother Earth for all her beauty and all that she has given us. Have her remind us to never take more than we need, and for her to remind to us to always give back more than we take. Wanishi, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Gray. That was incredible. And the parts that I loved was just that we really need to make sure we're taking action individually and collectively to protect our planet and to make sure we're always giving back more than we've actually taken. And I think that is just highly appropriate welcoming for what we're going to be discussing during CHOW 2022. So every year, I'm energized by Capitol Hill Ocean Week because of the number of people that actively engage in dialogue about how we keep our oceans and Great Lakes thriving for the communities that depend on them, the species that rely on them, and the future generations who deserve to enjoy them. And we take a lot of pride in the fact that CHOW is accessible to everyone. This is a high-level conference featuring some of the world's foremost experts in marine policy, economics, and science, and it's free and open to the public. Again, thank you to our sponsors who allow that to happen. So as you come here today, know that anyone here is free to engage in discussions and learn from the brightest and most experienced minds. Everyone is welcome to raise ideas, have your questions answered, propose solutions, or just come and simply listen to hear a new perspective. So I want to tell you a little bit more about what you can expect this week at CHOW 2022. So this year, we're splitting between 4 different events. Today and tomorrow, CHOW, the conference, is here in the Ronald Reagan Building. In addition to the plenaries that will be taking place in person in this auditorium, there are a number of virtual panels being hosted by our partner organizations and sponsors, and they'll take place during the lunch hour at 12 o'clock Eastern Time, and then after the conference at 4:45 p.m. I really encourage you to join online, and you can have access to these virtual panels either by watching through the virtual platform if you're not joining us in person, or if you're here in person, you can download the Capitol Hill app, and they'll be available through your tablet, your iPhone, whatever you might have. Then tonight is our Ocean Awards Gala, where we get to come together to celebrate people and organizations who have distinguished themselves in service for ocean conservation, science, and management. On Thursday, we're really happy to be back at Capitol Hill to continue the conversations with our friends in Congress. Unfortunately, due to this year with the restrictions in place, the event is only for Hill staff, but we're hoping that next year we will be able to have everybody come back and join us on Capitol Hill. And then finally, on Thursday evening, if you're here, we're having DC Wharf Night. We're showing the movie The Perfect Storm. Each ticket will secure you a seat on the pier, a welcome beer for those of age, and a bag of popcorn from Cantina Bambima. The show begins at 7:30. There's more information on our website at marinesanctuary.org. Now, as the chairman described the importance of the water to this area, DC is physically connected to the ocean through the Anacostia and Potomac rivers and through the diverse people that call it home. So we're proud once again to be partnering with the city for Capitol Hill Ocean Week, and thank Mayor Bowser for declaring this also DC Ocean Week and demonstrating the city's commitments to be good stewards of our water. The theme this year for CHOW is See the Future, and that's the name of our first plenary this morning. 50 years ago in 1972, the U.S. literally enacted a wave of legislation. The Marine Protection, Research, and Sanctuaries Act, the Marine Mammal Protection Act, the Coastal Zone Management Act, and amendments to the Clean Water Act to really help our oceans thrive, oceans, coasts, and Great Lakes thrive. If you think of that, these were major pieces of legislation passed in just 1 month in October 1972. It's truly incredible. Now, 50 years later, we face many new challenges, but all of these challenges still share a common solution, and that's people. So to kick off our plenary this morning, I'm going to turn to Dr. Francis Gullen for some opening remarks. Dr. Gulland is the chair of the Marine Mammal Commission and a tremendous partner that is saving some of the most iconic species in the world, including whales, seals, sea lions, and so many more. The commission is generously sponsoring this panel, and we are grateful for their support. Francis.
Well, thank you, Kris. I'm really honored to be here with you this morning and to be joining Chairman Gray and Kris in opening this Capitol Hill Oceans Week first session, See the Future, on behalf of the Marine Mammal Commission. So the commission was established under the Marine Mammal Protection Act in 1972. So here we are 50 years later, and as a community, we have achieved a lot over the past 50 years. Some marine mammals that were depleted as a result of commercial hunting and harvesting, like humpback whales and grey whales, fur seals, and sea otters, have recovered since these legal protections were put in place. Hawaiian monk seals, a species that lives on the beautiful northwest Hawaiian Islands, were seriously depleted by human activities at the turn of the century. Just after the Second World War, an aerial survey of Midway Atoll revealed one animal on Midway as the result of all the activities through the war and hunting and human actions. The good news is here we are 50 years later, and even in the initial years after the Marine Mammal Protection Act, the decline of the population continued in the 80s and 90s. A series of actions initiated with the establishment of the beautiful marine protected area, Papahana-Mokuakea, up on the northwestern islands. There was removal of marine debris, and then some really innovative actions by National Marine Fisheries Service to disentangle seals, translocate seals, and even vaccinate them, which now, in this era of COVID, I think we're all familiar of the efficacy of such measures. This year, the monk seal population has actually turned the corner, and the population is above 1,500 animals. So, however, although we have some successes, some species are seriously in trouble. The North Atlantic right whale, Rice's whale in the Gulf of Mexico, and the vaquita in the Gulf of California are severely endangered and face the very real risk of extinction. So furthermore, pollutants such as DDTs that were banned 50 years ago are still prevalent in our food webs. We know that there are levels of DDTs in tissues of California sea lions off the west coast that can cause cancer. And just last year, 30,000 barrels of toxics of some unknown substance were discovered on the seabed off the coast of Santa Barbara. So this really tells us that what happened 50 years ago can still impact these animals. And so we really need to think now about what are we doing now that will impact marine mammals in the future over our next 50 years. Looking forward, I think the biggest challenge that we face is combating climate change and its impacts on marine mammals, both their distributions, their health, their prey, and their habitat. I think we're all familiar with impacts of climate change on animals in the Arctic, ice loss and its impacts on polar bears and walrus. But throughout the US, we're already seeing severe impacts. Harmful algal blooms are increasing along the west coast. They're poisoning sea lions and seals, some cetaceans also, and levels of domoic acid, a harmful algal bloom toxin, have been detected now even in Alaska in the stomachs of walruses. Harmful algal blooms also poison dolphins and manatees off Florida. Monk seals are losing breeding habitat because of sea level rise. Pups are getting washed away from beaches, and females don't have a place to breed. And then range shifts of large whales are putting them now in harm's way from fisheries entanglements and ship strikes, undercutting our previous efforts to protect them from these threats. So I think these facts demonstrate that the health of marine mammals and humans are really interrelated. This may sound sort of a nice thing to say, but if you think about it, harmful algal blooms poison humans as well as marine mammals. Sea level rise can wash our homes away as well as breeding habitat for monk seals. So really, our health, the health of marine mammals and the oceans are all interrelated. So if we can conserve marine mammals, we can protect their ecosystems, and we can allow these oceans to recover and provide the benefits that we as humans also need from our oceans. So as we start off today in this first session, we're going to hear from a panel of people who are really looking to the next 50 years. They're going to tell us about our challenges, and they're going to suggest actions that we can take as a community to move forward together to protect our oceans. We are all stakeholders with our marine mammals. So finally, I'd again just like to thank the National Marine Sanctuary Foundation for bringing us all together here, both in person and virtually, to provide a forum where we can work together to save our oceans for future generations. So thank you, and let's welcome our panel.
Okay, on to the main event. This opening panel is going to be a little bit different than what you've had in the past. We're going to have a series of TED Talks. We have some amazing doers and thinkers coming out on stage next, and they're going to tell you about the issues that they think we need to tackle in order to have a brighter future for our oceans, coasts, and Great Lakes. We didn't ask them to try to come up with the solutions. We asked them to kind of present what they thought was the critical issue. And so we're really excited to have these different perspectives that are going to be offered. After that, we're going to have a panel come up and kind of have a little bit of a follow-up discussion about what we heard today as a conclusion to all the different talks. So I'm thrilled to welcome onto stage our first speaker, Dr. Nikki Traylor Knowles, who's the President and Chief Financial Officer of Black Women in Ecology, Evolution, and Marine Science. She's an assistant professor in marine biology and ecology at the University of Miami Rosenthal School of Marine and Atmospheric Sciences. Dr. Traylor Knowles is an advocate for Black women in science and academia and is determined to disrupt the system by creating a new narrative and new structure. Nikki, please come on stage.
Good morning, everybody. It's wonderful to be here. I want to start with an exercise. So I'd like actually everybody to stand up. I know, grumble, grumble, grumble. All right. So I'd like you to keep standing if you identify as a scientist, a social scientist, or a policymaker. You can sit down if you don't. Okay, and I'd like you to keep standing if you collaborate with people. Most of us do. I'd like you to keep standing if you collaborate with groups that are led by women. Great. And I'd like you to keep standing now if you collaborate with groups that are led by women of color. And now I'd like you to keep standing if you collaborate with groups that are led by Black women. Okay. Thank you. Everybody can sit down. Thank you. I like to start with this activity because I think it's important to know the landscape in which we're working with, and also to understand that in order to have solutions, we need to have diverse perspectives at the table. My name is Nikki Traylor Knowles. I'm an associate professor now at the University of Miami. And to really deal with these changes that we're seeing, I realized that I was tired of being alone and that I wanted to see other Black women at the table. So to address that, I began the nonprofit called Black Women in Ecology, Evolution, and Marine Science. And the idea was that we really want to have diverse perspectives. And actually, Black women and other people of color are generally at the front lines of our biggest problem right now, which is climate change. Yet, when it comes to solving those problems, many of them are not at the table. And so I'm determined with the women in my group to actually help change this. So our group right now is composed of undergrads all the way through to senior professionals, And most of our events are online because our members are all over the world. And the idea is that we can get together, have community, we can share our stories, get professional development, and network. Because we all know, sitting in this room, networking is what it's about. But if you're isolated, how can you network? How can you meet the people that you need to meet to get your agenda through or to make change? So BWEAMS is what we call this. The nickname is BWEAMS. At BWEAMS, we really worked hard and worked together to help cause change and help cause disruption within conservation, evolution, marine science, and ecology fields. So like I mentioned before, Black women and other people of color are at the front lines of climate change, and we have the solutions. We're just not being heard. So we really have an opportunity to work together to actually come up with creative solutions, because climate change is affecting all of us. So why aren't we all at the table to make these solutions happen? And so I think that it's really now we have a call to action to really come together and to really work together to have diverse solutions. And one of the things that I've been so grateful and excited about is that by having BWEAMS as an entity, we can actually strategize innovative solutions for climate change. Now, in my day-to-day, I'm actually a scientist, a basic scientist. I work on coral reefs, and I'm really interested in coral immune systems. And I'm so grateful that I was able to have mentors and networks to help me get to where I am now. But I know of many, in particular, Black women that have not had that support to be able to get to where we are now, and it is creating an information vacuum. And that scares me, and it should scare you. Because the ideas that are missing, these could be the ideas that could help turn the ship around. And so, just to keep within time, I've got 5 minutes. I just want to say thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for being willing to listen and for interacting and having an open mind to know that diverse perspectives are important. I started the day with that activity to show that we are all actively participating in making science a diverse place. And so think about that. Later, when you are making these decisions, when you are collaborating, who am I collaborating with? And could I have a more diverse team that could have different ideas? And so with that, I thank you so much, and I thank all of our sponsors for BWEAMS. And I look forward to speaking with many of you later at this wonderful event. Thank you.
I know it's really unfair. We only give everybody about 5 minutes to speak, so I really encourage everybody to engage our speakers from this panel after the event as well. So next, we're going to hear from Michelle Bender, who is the Ocean Campaign Director at the Earth Island. See, I told you I was a little rusty and a little nervous. Let me try this again. Next, we're going to hear from Michelle Bender, who is the Ocean Campaigns Director at the Earth Law Center, where she's the founder and leading expert in the movement towards ocean rights, an ecocentric framework to protect and restore ocean health. Michelle is an environmental law and policy specialist with expertise in ocean and wildlife law, sea otter conservation, and marine mammal protection. So let me welcome Michelle to stage.
Thank you for the organizers, the invitation and opportunity to speak to you today. I come to you from Seattle, Washington, and the stolen lands of the Coast Salish people. Every person, regardless of where we are or what we are doing, have something in common. We are all breathing, and the reason we can do that is because of the ocean. Despite this commonality, we all value and view the ocean differently, and this has led to competing objectives and many paradoxes in marine governance, including that an understanding of the ocean from land and economic metrics have largely dictated how we relate to and value the ocean. Therefore, I believe the most important action that we can take to help our ocean and Great Lakes thrive for future generations is to create a new vision of what this is. and to define thriving from the ocean's own interests and needs. This vision must come from a place as humankind, as interconnected with and dependent upon the ocean as our source of life. This vision must view conservation as consistent with the economy and human well-being. This vision must implement our responsibilities to protect and conserve the marine environment just as fervently as our right to exploit. And this vision must implement our responsibility, and this vision must respect and listen and learn from the kinship and plurality of values present in indigenous and traditional knowledge, customary practices, and the relationships of island and coastal communities with the ocean. We are seeing such a call for transformative change and a break away from business as usual. But how do we actually do this? The recognition of the ocean as a living being, an entity with inherent rights to exist, thrive, and evolve, is one way to create a new vision of what is thriving. Over 115 rights of nature laws, policies, judicial decisions, and treaty agreements exist in over 20 countries from the local to national level. In the US alone, we have dozens of local ordinances and resolutions, including in Santa Monica, which passed the Sustainability Rights Ordinance in 2014, proclaiming not only that the community has a right to self-governance, but that the natural environment and the marine waters have fundamental and inalienable rights to exist. Both San Francisco and Malibu passed resolutions protecting the rights of whales and dolphins to free and safe passage in their coastal waters. Tribal nations, such as the Nez Perce tribe and the Yurok tribe, have formally recognized their cultural and spiritual relationships with and the rights of the Snake River and the Klamath River, respectively. And most recently, an effort was introduced to create a Great Lakes Bill of Rights in New York. For the past 5 years, I have been working to establish what this approach can look like within ocean law and policy, from the species level to marine protected areas, and then internationally for the ocean as a whole. This legal framework generally, and in this case for the ocean, recognizes that the ocean is a living being with inherent rights. But not only this, that the ocean should have a voice and be represented in decision-making. Similar to other rights-based movements, this legal change signals a paradigm shift, a shift in our relationship with the ocean and the values, ethics, and beliefs that underlie our legal governance and economic systems. Now, rights is just the first step. Just as with human rights, we have to create these standards and principles to guide implementation. With rights and nature laws, we're seeing really innovative and new forms of each. For example, in countries such as New Zealand and Colombia, we see the development of co-management structures with local communities and indigenous peoples to legally act as guardians to represent an ecosystem's interests and intrinsic values in decisions and disputes. In Ecuador, we have seen court cases criminalizing shark fishing in the Galapagos Marine Reserve and to protect mangroves from infrastructure projects and activities that may violate their vital cycles and functions. And in the Salish Sea, we are working to include the southern resident orcas as stakeholders in fishery allocation meetings to ensure they receive the minimal amount of Chinook salmon to meet their basic dietary needs and recover as a population. We're just in the beginning stages of learning the possibilities offered by creating a universal approach to looking after the ocean and ourselves. Altogether, rights is a reflection of societal values and provide an opportunity to implement our responsibility as stewards and custodians for future generations of all life on the planet, not just humanity. I deeply thank all of you for the amazing work you're doing, but I ask us to aim even higher. And I ask all of us, what if our vision was oriented around what the ocean and the Great Lakes themselves as entities worthy of care and respect need to be healthy and thriving? Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. That was wonderful. So we're going to continue the discussion with Maya Van Ressum, who's the founder of Green Amendments for Generations. It's a grassroots nonprofit organization inspiring a national-wide movement to secure constitutional recognition and protection of environmental rights in every state and ultimately at the federal level. She also serves as the Delaware River Keeper, leading the watershed-based advocacy organization, the Delaware River Keeper Network, for over 30 years, and its efforts to protect the health of the Delaware River and its tributaries. Please come on stage.
Thank you so much. It's truly an honor to be here on the sacred lands of the Piscataway people and to be part of this morning plenary session. I'm so honored. As you've heard, I'm Maya Van Rossum. Oh, slides coming up different. It's one of those things, but that's okay. We won't worry about it. I'm Maya Van Rossum, and I think the most important thing I want you to know about me is that I've been an environmental activist and attorney for nearly 30 years now. And it's as a result of that 30 years of work that I've come to experience how our current system of environmental protection laws here in the United States of America is fundamentally failing us and fundamentally flawed. And as a result, we can see that because as a result, the Great Lakes are in peril from all kinds of environmental insults. We have people across our nation who are drinking contaminated water, breathing polluted air, being forced to live next to toxic sites. And of course, the United States of America is a major contributor to the climate crisis. And so as a result, I believe that we need a new pathway forward, a transformational pathway forward when it comes to environmental protection here in the United States of America. Now, generally, when people hear me say that, at least one person, if not many, say, hey, Maya, how is it possible that we need a new pathway forward for environmental protection? Why do we need something new? We have hundreds of thousands of environmental protection laws, regulations, policies, programs, agencies, all focused on the environment and environmental protection. Wouldn't we be better served, rather than creating something new, focusing in on doing what we're already doing, but doing it better? And I would suggest to you that that would be a fundamentally flawed approach, because our current system of laws and governance here in the United States of America at its core is focused on accepting and legalizing environmental pollution, harm, and degradation. It is not a system that is focused on prevention of harm first. It is also a system filled with gaps. There are all sorts of environmental harms that are not addressed by this system of laws and governance. Sometimes the gap is unintentional. All too often, it is very intentional. And sadly, environmental racism is built in to this system of environmental laws and governance here in the United States. And so we can see, no matter how you look at it, we can see that something is missing from how we're protecting the environment here in the U.S. And I'm here to suggest to you that a very important something missing is that we are not recognizing and protecting at the highest constitutional level our rights as people to clean water, clean air, a stable climate, and healthy environments, in the same way that we are recognizing and protecting the other fundamental human, civil, and political rights that we hold dear. And yet we know our environmental rights are worthy of highest constitutional recognition and protection. So how do we secure it? We secure it through the passage of what I call constitutional green amendments, environmental rights amendments added to our state and federal constitutions that will raise up environmental rights and protect them on par with the other human, civil, and political rights that we hold dear. Now, if you want to secure this highest protection, not just any language will do. And we know that because actually almost every state constitution across our nation talks about the environment and environmental rights, but only Pennsylvania, Montana, and New York raise up environmental rights to the highest constitutional level where we protect those other fundamental freedoms. So what are the key criteria of a constitutional green amendment? There are a number of them, but I'm just going to highlight a few. First off, the language needs to be placed in the Bill of Rights section of the Constitution. That's where we place those other fundamental rights. That's where we need to place our environmental rights. We need to be clear about what we are protecting, the rights of all people to clean water, clean air, a stable climate, and healthy environments. We need to be clear that we are creating an obligation on all government officials to protect the natural resources of our state and our nation for both present generations here today and future generations yet to come. How does a Green Amendment change things? A Green Amendment changes things in important ways. It refocuses our government on prevention of pollution, degradation, and harm. Not happening to the end of the process where we're figuring out how we're going to manage pollution and degradation through permitting. It empowers environmental justice by ensuring that all government officials are constitutionally obligated to protect the environmental rights of all people equitably, regardless of race, ethnicity, or socioeconomics. The goal of constitutional green amendments is better decisions in the first place. The reality of constitutional green amendments is when our government officials get it wrong, people get access to the courts to vindicate their constitutional rights. And it's not just about strengthening the law, it's also about better empowering people. So now when people get involved in environmental advocacy, they're not just fighting for people and the earth, but they're also fighting for a constitutional right. And here in the United States, that changes the playing field. This is a powerful movement that's beginning with state constitutions first and will ultimately culminate in a federal constitutional green amendment because we need them both. So with that, I hope I convinced you that what we need here in the United States of America is constitutional green amendments if we are going to secure the transformational change that will best protect our people and our environments across generations. Thank you.
Thanks, Maya. Our next speaker is Nell Minnow. She is the Vice Chair of Value Edge Advisors. Nell has been named one of the 20 most influential people in corporate governance by Directorship Magazine and dubbed the Queen of Good Corporate Governance by Business Week Online. So please welcome Nell to the stage.
Thank you very much. It's wonderful to be here. I'm here to ask you to do one thing for me, and I want you to do it today. I want you to send one email. It only needs one sentence. All the information that you need about sending this email is on my website today, valueedgeadvisors.com, and there's a handout about it as well. Now, probably most of you think that the Securities and Exchange Commission, the Department of Labor, have very little to do with climate change. And I'm here to tell you that that is not true. And I need you to send an email to the SEC, and I need you to do it today. I think you all know that the secret of a magic trick is misdirection, right? We want you to look over here. You won't pay attention to what's going over there. That's what corporate America does by having you focus on the EPA, which is great, the Interior Department, while they are smashing through rulemakings at the SEC and the Labor Department that make it much, much, much harder for us to do anything about climate change. You may ask, what does the SEC have to do with climate change? Well, the SEC's got a proposed rulemaking right now, I know you all know what that is, that would make corporations give us much more, much better information about what they're doing on climate change. In the last weeks of the Trump administration, the Labor Department and the SEC pushed through 4 horrific rules that protect companies from any kind of oversight on climate change. And we are now trying to undo them. I'm going to teach you the legal term for that, unscramble the egg. Okay, unscrambling the egg is a lot harder than scrambling the egg, but that is what we're trying to do. And the SEC is moving forward with this very important rulemaking. It would bring U.S. companies in line with the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures. I know you all know about that, the TCFD, and the Greenhouse Gas Protocol disclosures, which would be a huge step forward. We would have, for the first time, access to more impactful, more consistent, more transparent information from corporations. And they are fighting like mad to prevent that from happening. One thing that they do, one technique that they have that drives me nuts, is that they create fake front groups that are funded by people like the Kochs and the fossil fuel companies, and they all have perky names like Citizens for Sunshine. And what they are is oil lobbyists that are working on these rules. And so comments come into the SEC from groups that are Houston for a Better Public Policy, and they don't say who their funders are. And they don't tell us that the money is all coming from the oil companies. And that's why it's so important that we get people who are aware of these issues, who care about these issues, to file a comment. It just takes one email and one sentence. We don't want the same sentence from everybody because the staff will overlook that, so you have to put in something to make it a little bit different. But all you need to say is, I support this rule, I have stock, or I someday may buy stock, and I think these disclosures are absolutely essential. Because my particular interest is in corporate governance, which is the boards of directors, I particularly like the part of the rule which says that companies would have to disclose for the first time. Is there anybody on the board that has any expertise in climate change? That will be a deal changer, because they don't want to say no. They'll start putting people on the board so that they can say yes. We saw that before in the post-Enron era, where they had to have an accounting expert. And guess what? They started putting accounting experts on boards. We can do that with climate change. We want every company in America to have a director who's got some expertise in climate change. Every company in America, every company in the world is affected by climate change, whether it's the supply chain, whether it's insurance, whether it is their operations, whether it is opportunities to create new products. We want them to think about it, and the only way to get them to think about it is to make them tell us what they're doing about it. Now, I have to say, even if this rule goes through as proposed, it will be challenged in court, and we need to keep an eye on that. And when you look at the website, if you want to, of the SEC, you can look at other comments that have been filed. And if you do that, look and see where they're coming from. Are they coming from Citizens for Sunshine? Are they coming from a professor who does not disclose who's funding the research? Or are they coming from people like you? You are the people that we really need to hear from. So go to my website at valueedgeadvisors.com. It's right on the top today. I put it up there just for you. That will tell you who to send the email to, and critically important, what needs to be in the subject line. That's the only technical thing about it. After that, all you need to say is, I support the rulemaking and I care about these issues. Coming up, there is another SEC rule that has to do with more environmental issues, having to do with companies that say that they support ESG, environmental social governance. They have to tell you what that means. Again, crucially important, and misdirection. They're over here while you're looking over there. So you can always check my website at Value Edge Advisors to find out what the latest is on any of these issues. And you can also email me. I'm always happy to hear from you. So thank you very much for being here and for all the good work that you do.
We have two final speakers. Next, we're going to hear from Dr. Naomi Rose, who's a marine mammal scientist at the Animal Welfare Institute. She's been a member of the International Whaling Commission Scientific Committee since 2000, where she participates in the Subcommittee on Environmental Concerns, Small Cetaceans, and Whale Watching. Dr. Rose co-chairs a coalition of nonprofit organizations devoted to defending and strengthening the Marine Mammal Protection Act. Naomi, please join us on stage.
Thank you, Kris. Dr. Gulland actually already gave my talk. The United States was once a whaling nation, and 19th century Yankee whalers hunted right and other whales up and down the eastern seaboard and further afield. Whale oil fueled city lamps and built margarine empires. Seals were also hunted for their oil, and they and sea otters fed a thriving fur trade. By the mid-1900s, many marine mammal populations in U.S. waters were severely depleted. The passage of the Marine Mammal Protection Act in 1972 changed that. This landmark legislation ended commercial hunting of marine mammals, a sea change in our relationship with these extraordinary creatures. But it also looked ahead in ways that speak to some of our present concerns about biodiversity loss. With remarkable prescience, the MMPA sought to protect marine mammals in an ecosystem context. It also emphasized the precautionary principle, which was a concept in its infancy then. The MMPA promoted the protection of entire taxa not because of their conservation status, but because of their cryptic nature to us landlubbers. Entire species could disappear before science might even notice. Even now, researchers are identifying new marine mammal species, including a great whale right on our doorstep. Rice's whale, a behemoth hiding in plain sight in the urban seascape of the Gulf of Mexico. As soon as it was identified, it was declared endangered. Congress also recognized that marine mammals have great social, cultural, and ecological value. Marine mammals are often keystone species in their habitats. Sea otters, for example, allow Pacific kelp forests to thrive, which in turn shelter a diversity of larval fish. And without sea otters, their prey, urchins and shellfish, overtake kelp forests, clear-cutting them in essence, leaving coastal waters unprotected. Quite simply, these popular and charismatic species can be the linchpin that holds the marine environment together. Even dead, marine mammals contribute in ways we once couldn't have imagined. The huge carcasses of whales capture carbon, carrying it to the seafloor as whale fall, where it stays safely out of the atmosphere. Marine carcasses also provide fodder for fantastic assemblages of deep-sea creatures, as alien to us as any extraterrestrial might prove to be. In 50 years, the MMPA has rescued a good number of species from extinction, but what about the next 50 years? Many species have a long way to go before they're recovered, especially as human pressures have increased beyond what Congress might have anticipated in 1972. Bycatch remains the deadliest threat to marine mammals who become entangled, drown, or are severely injured in fishing gear. Others, such as polar bears, which the MMPA shielded from overhunting, now face the growing threat of climate change. Without ice, polar bears have no stable platform from which to hunt the seals that are their primary prey. The once undisputed kings of the North now face starvation as their world literally melts away beneath their massive paws. Marine litter is not just unsightly, it can be deadly. Plastic is by far the most ubiquitous type of marine debris found even in the stomachs of Antarctic species. No corner of the world, even the deep ocean, is free of it, especially as microplastics, its most pernicious form. To mitigate these and other threats, we need to change our individual and corporate behavior. We need to strengthen our environmental laws, including the MMPA, to provide managers with all the tools necessary to meet current and future challenges. These tools include better processes for addressing cumulative and chronic impacts, and novel methods and technologies, such as satellite imagery or drones, for monitoring, reducing, and removing threats to the marine environment. We also must continue to conduct research on emerging threats, including novel disease. The United States went from ruthlessly hunting these animals to protecting them within one memorable year. The past 50 years have seen remarkable recoveries. Many of these success stories are now threatened by a changing planet and our increasing exploitation of the seas. We must help ensure that U.S. ocean policy remains effective into the next 50 years. Thank you.
Our final speaker today is Nia Lewis, who's the founder of Salted Logic. It's an Indigenous, women-owned media collective which uses arts, culture, conservation, management, and social enterprise to increase creative capacity and resiliency in individuals and teams. I'm very happy that Nia is going to be able to close our series of TED Talks, and as I said, afterwards we'll have a panel kind of come and do a synthesis of all that you've heard today. So Nia, let me invite you on to stage. Thanks, Nia.
Aloha Mako. Good morning, everyone. My name is Nia. I'd also like to send just a big aloha to the Piscataway people, right? The people who are genealogically connected to this Aina. So as an independent artist and founder of Salted Logic, an indigenous women-led media collective, I'm also a large-scale marine protected area practitioner because of my 10 years of working at Papahana Mokuakea. So this interesting background has allowed me to experience some really pivotal moments in conservation where you could really say the needle was moved forward, at least in engaging people and communities, which are really the core of conservation. And what's interesting is in all of these moments, it was when conservation and science really kind of took a back seat. It's when community and people could really frame their stories within a socio-cultural context and really put forth, right, their personal histories. So as they told their stories, conservation themes were clear, but I think they were made more powerful because conservation was not the core of the conversation. So as we move forward to the future of protections for our oceans and coastlines globally, but especially here in the United States, we really need to expand our imagination to match the scope and scale of the problems that we're facing. We need to cultivate storylines that really dismantle this either-or construct, nature or science, people or conservation, top-down, bottom-up. And we also have to innovate beyond integration, right? Especially, an easy example is Western and indigenous knowledge systems. Integration is not the same as co-creatively designing, right, an equitable future for all. And it's not that integration is bad, it's just insufficient. So how do we scale up our imagination and at the same time increase protections, engage communities so that we really have sustainable long-term resources? Well, there's no one single approach, but with future generations in mind, I think we'd be better off prioritizing artistic literacy versus conservation and ocean literacy. We really must trust that we're going to help nature more effectively if we can hold a deeper understanding of our shared human experience, if we can challenge our beliefs and perceptions, and if we can cultivate our ability to revise what we think is true, what we think is valuable and authentic. So if you haven't heard of this term before, artistic literacy, it's a teachable skill, and it's not about being able to draw, right? It's the ability to connect personally and meaningfully with not just works of art, right, but to forge connections between our humanity and the humanity of others. It's the ability to understand nuance and to use symbolism. And these are vital skills as we endeavor to protect and connect to ever larger and often more remote ocean areas and wilderness areas. Areas that remain, for most people, beyond their direct personal experience. So there's many ways that we can grow our creative capacity and artistic literacy, but I'm just going to use my solo group and art murals as an example. So this particular image that you guys see here is of a wave called Kalehuawehe. And it's become mythical at this point because you don't actually see it because of the way they've changed the coastlines in Hawaii, in Waikiki. So this wave Kalehuawehe would roll onto shore supposedly from a mile out. Now, this is a Hawaii that I've never experienced, right? It's the Hawaii of ancient times, maybe up until the 30s and 40s. It's the Waikiki of my father's childhood. But he was so, he was really so amazing in the way that he conveyed his childhood experiences, that's his memories, it's as if they are my own. And so I didn't need to actually experience Waikiki of the 30s and 40s to be inspired by it, right, and to move forward and to create. And all of his stories were never about conservation. They were about surfing, hanging with the Beach Boys, right, and just living with aloha. But he absolutely raised me with a sense of what we would call, right, a conservation ethic. In this next image here, there are 25 3.5-inch tiles, and they were distributed to the scholars, academics, scientists, cultural practitioners, and conservation professionals, as well as LSMPA managers who participated in the 2016 workshop to develop a paper for the Code of Conduct for Marine Conservation. Now, none of the participants knew what the final image was going to be, but once we revealed it, they absolutely understood the symbolism. And so here you see a he'e, and it's called manakia'i, right? It's the guardian of the ocean, and the he'e are octopus. And the 8 tentacles really represent reaching out to diverse communities. And the strength that you need as a guardian, right, is to be able to protect all. And so the symbolism here as well is that the octopus can bring these diverse ideas back into a central theme, right, to create trusted, lasting bonds with community. And then this last image, although it doesn't seem very exciting, are 6 tiles from about 100, and they are basically, they're going to be what we start. The final image is because I'm going to be initiating a mural here at CHOW in honor of Papahānaumokuākea, right, and the 20 years of accomplishments that many people from many sectors have contributed. And so just like the former art pieces that you saw, this isn't going to be about what they did in conservation for the monument. It's really going to be extracting their personal stories to contribute to the larger whole. And so, of course, creating art alone is not going to solve all of our problems. But I'm hoping that it could expand, right, our minds in order to be able to conceive of solutions that maybe that we once thought were just not possible. And ideally, it will open our hearts to give us the courage to do so. Mahalo.
Thank you, Nia. That was an amazing way to close our series of TED Talks. I'm going to ask Anna, Vidya, and Steve to join us up on stage as I introduce each of them. Last year, for the first time, we created a CHOW Advisory Committee to help us with programming for the conference. And they have been fantastic. We had a fantastic advisory committee last year, an amazing one this year. So we have 3 members that are actually going to join us for this discussion. So first is Vidya Balasubramaniam. And Vidya, thank you. I was practicing that to make sure I did not mess it up as somebody whose name is never pronounced right. She's a research science and program director for the Coastal States Organization. Vidya works in close coordination with the Coastal Zone Management Program and federal agencies across the nation to advance coastal science and management priorities with an emphasis on meaningful and authentic ways to center social justice issues in coastal management work. Next is Steve Rohde, who is a professor of the practice of law at Duke University School of Law and holds a secondary appointment as a professor of the practice at the Duke Nicholas School of the Environment. In addition to teaching, Steve consults regularly with nonprofit organizations on matters involving conservation and management of ocean and coastal resources. And Dr. Anna Spalding, who is an associate professor of marine and coastal policy at Oregon State University and the research associate at the Smithsonian Tropical Research Institute and Coba Research Station in Panama. And her research encompasses the human dimensions of the marine environment. So I want to thank everybody for joining us, and I'm going to join them over on stage. And if you don't mind, before I get started, I'm going to do a special call out this morning to the Scuba Nuts, who are back here joining us after a couple of years in remote. These are a fantastic group of young individuals from Florida who come up for CHOW every year and are tremendous advocates for our oceans and Great Lakes. So I just want to acknowledge that they're here joining us today. All right, well, we have not given you an easy task today, I recognize that, but we've heard some incredible different perspectives, some you may agree with, some you may not agree with, about what we need to do to tackle for the future of our oceans and Great Lakes. So I'd love to hear if there was 1 or 2 issues that really kind of struck home for you and why. And I'm just going to start with Anna, who's right next to me.
All right, thanks, Kris. Thanks, everyone. Super happy to be here. So I wish this would have been perfect for my class. I teach a very ambitious class, U.S. Ocean Coastal Law and Policy. It's in 10 weeks. And I wish I had recorded this, and it would have been all 10 weeks covered, right?
You're lucky it's recorded online.
Oh, well, there we go. Course done. It was really wonderful to hear actual solutions, right? So it was an identification of problems, but also paths forward. As a social scientist whose sort of work really emphasizes this dynamic relationship between people and the environment, but really grounded in application, so I'm also what I call an applied social scientist. I think what stood out was this idea of redefining ocean narratives and the different ways in which we can do that through legal means, economic means, art, inclusion of people, inclusion of women, inclusion of Black women. And so I guess all of them stood out, but definitely the possibility of redefining the way we understand the ocean and some very concrete steps to do that.
Very great. Steve.
Thanks. Set of presentations, I think what stood out for me was the notion that we really ought to be trying to be more transparent and accountable about the way we deal with the oceans and what they do for us. I was really struck by the call for constitutional amendments, green amendments, the idea that maybe we should be doing a better job with respect to some of the statutes that we already have. I would like to put a plug in for the public trust doctrine, actually, which I think is an untapped resource here. It's a doctrine that comes down to us really from the Greeks and the Romans through the common law, and basically provides that the sovereign who controls the resource is supposed to maintain it in a sustainable way. And I think if we did a better job of that with the oceans and coasts, we'd be better off, frankly. That was sort of my takeaway.
Thanks. Vidya.
I'm still reeling from Nia Lewis's talk where she invited us to expand our imagination. So I like to think of myself as a coastal manager by day and an artist by night. So I practice dance and then I practice watercolor sketching and painting. And I never really thought that there is a way to connect these two. But from what I heard, it's this idea of artistic literacy that feeds into our work, challenges our neurons to be more flexible, make connections where they don't exist. And so I saw that theme coming across from the other panelists who challenged us to enact transformative change, so rebuild systems, reimagine systems from the ground up. So this idea of reimagining really stood out to me throughout all the amazing speakers we heard.
Great, thank you. And I'm going to take a little liberty as moderator to make a couple of comments. I have to say that one of the things that really touched me the most was Chairman Gray's comments about if we think about giving back more than we take away, and you think of that additive work, I think that's actually really key. I think something everybody picked up here, and this is a story I like to share, is Violet Sage Walker, who's with the Northern Chumash and is working on a sanctuary designation, once told me that we need to stop thinking about having a sustainable ocean and talking about having a thriving ocean, because if we talk about sustain, we kind of keep going down because we're sustaining different baselines, versus if you think of that kind of additive type of thing. And I thought a lot of the speakers this morning were thinking, it was a paradigm shift, right? It was a different way of thinking. It was a way of thinking that is additive. When we had folks here with the environmental rights movement, which is a very new kind of movement, and somebody who's a traditional DC kind of policy person, I'm like, really? Do you think we can do that? Really? This is amazing. But it's incredible because we have people that really kind of do that shift. I think that is really, really a very kind of key perspective here on that. Well, okay, so let me turn to another question, which is, we talked about this conference really about celebrating the progress of the last 50 years, but not just about celebrating that progress, really needing to look forward at what we need to do into the future. And so I would love to hear your perspectives on, kind of where we've been, where you think we are, and where you're going. And I really do want us I want to challenge you to challenge us about what it is that we need to do collectively, individually, globally, as we move forward. So think big. I like to say I'm amazed 50 years ago, these incredible pieces of legislation got passed. Can we do it again? Should we do it again? What would those pieces of legislation look like today? So I'd love your kind of thoughts about where we've been, where we are now, and where you think we need to be going. I'll start with Steve. I'll give you a breakdown of that.
Thanks a lot, Kris. Well, obviously, in 1972, climate change was not top of mind for people, and I think that's what's going on today without starting with climate change. It overarches everything. It affects, as was so eloquently said by the speakers, it affects all sorts of things in the ocean. We need to keep that in mind. course, as a lawyer, you know, always looking for, well, what's the sort of the weaponry we can use to deal with this kind of, can we get traction legally to deal with that? And I have to say, climate change is a classic case of, you know, thinking globally and acting locally. I mean, we all know climate change is a problem, and we all know efforts are being taken, you know, at an international level, perhaps at a glacial pace. But in the meantime, I think we ought to think a little more granularly about what we can do, for example, in the U.S., just to bring it right down to the Chesapeake Bay, for example. You know, Chairman Gray made the point that clean water is vital. Well, you know, when the Clean Water Act was passed in 1972, the industry folks that were referred to earlier did a great job of lobbying basically a non-point source exemption into the act. And so the Clean Water Act doesn't really very well control agricultural runoff. And as a result, we have dead zones. We have dead zones in the Gulf of Mexico. We have them in Chesapeake Bay. We have them all over the country. This is a serious problem. This is something that could be, at least in theory, done at a very specific level, in theory. You could do a little revision to the Clean Water Act. Easier said than done, obviously. But there's one example of something we could do going forward that would help us deal with the effects of, for example, climate change and warming and ocean acidification. That's just one specific example I can pull out of the hat.
Lydia, what's your thoughts?
So for where we've been, I was particularly astounded when Maya, who talked about constitutional green amendments, brought up the idea that the programs, the policies that have been developed over the past few years are not sufficient. And she said they're not sufficient because they are designed to exclude. And so coming to where we are now, a lot of the speakers talked about new and different forms of engagement. So through art, through different types of laws and governance structures. And bringing that to where we want to go, Dr. Nikki Traylor Knowles, she was talking about collaborating with Black women. And so the point that I'm trying to make is that we can have all the best policies, programs, agendas, the best types of engagement strategies, but they're all still insufficient because of the imbalance in power dynamics. So I'm hoping that where we're going from here is not just new engagement strategies, not just new types of projects and programs, but new ways to flip current power structures and flip power dynamics so that the people who should have had power but don't have the power are able to get the power that they should have had in the first place. So it's that restorative justice type of angle that was spurred by what Dr. Nikki Traylor Knowles talked about. I think that's where I'd like to see things go.
Yep. Anna?
Yes, NVIDIA, I was going to say something very similar. I think we clearly know where we've been, and I think we've achieved so much in the past 50 years. Where we are right now, I would say, is in disruption, right? The climate system, the environmental systems, the social systems, right? We're all sort of in this moment of, I mean, I personally still shock at sort of, how everything is changing. And so inevitable change moving forward, and I think it can be really good. I think people are at the table. Nikki is here. Tiara Moore with BIMS is here. There are more women, more diverse people, more ways of representing. And how we get there, we need to fund it. We need to support more of that work. We need to not just have people at the table, but fund them so that they can get to the table and not suffer or not have a hard time while they're getting to the table. So this disruption, I think, is leading to change. I can't say exactly where we're going, but I think it's going to be exciting. And to the point of I think Nell's comment as well, again, as a social scientist, I'm a critical human geographer. I really appreciate the idea of understanding the system, understanding the flaws in the system, and trying to find ways to, again, disrupt, redesign.
That's great. I'm going to pick up on this disruption question, and we're really lucky because we have three very different perspectives. We have Vidya, who's a practitioner, Steve, who is a legal scholar, Anna, who's working on social science issues and governance issues. So, disruption is something that makes people pretty nervous. Changes to systems, changes to things we have. So I can't come up with a better word, but how do we get comfortable with disruption in such a way that we see it as a healthy thing that causes change that we need to? Because there was, I would probably say, some severe disruptions in our system. So we talked about the fact that in 1968, by going into space, for the first time, you saw a moonrise and you saw what this planet was. And it caused disruption when you started realizing it's fragile. It's something we have to take care of. And then you have a number of environmental catastrophes that took place that led to this. And so in some ways, that disruption is a very healthy thing. It can lead to change. It can lead to progress. But I think most people hear disruption and they get nervous. They get scared. So how do you think of getting people either comfortable with it or creating that disruption in the system that we might need to move things forward to really make some of these changes so we continue to having a thriving ocean, a thriving blue planet? And I'm going to let anybody take that question.
There's an effort now that the international negotiation going on now at the UN for the areas beyond national jurisdiction is one effort by the global community to come to grips with the fact that the oceans are in trouble. They're being overfished, they're being polluted, they're warming. There's a real strong effort at the international level to try to sort of get a handle on the disruption, as it were, come up with better ways of doing environmental assessments for actions in the ocean, perhaps doing regional-based management approaches to marine protected areas. But it's difficult. It's frankly difficult. I think the reason the ABNJ negotiations got started was that people did feel disrupted and concerned by all the problems the oceans were facing, and they're trying now to get their arms around it. That's a really difficult process, the international process, I have to say. At the U.S. level, I quite agree that we ought to do a better job of looking at things from the ocean's point of view and trying to figure out what's good for the oceans. And I think, again, to bring it back to a federal statute in the U.S., the National Environmental Policy Act does give you a chance to take a look up front at the environmental effects of what you're going to do in the oceans, and we ought to do a better job, frankly, of doing that when we go forward.
I'd actually like to echo what some of our indigenous speakers were saying during this panel. It's not about either or. It's not about being comfortable versus being uncomfortable. I think there's a space between these different binaries, and sometimes it's okay to not be comfortable with disruption. It's okay to be fearful of it. It's just learning to live with these different spectrum of emotions, not treating fear of disruption as a bad thing, but more as an opportunity to grow. So I'm looking forward to welcoming any anxieties and any fears that come from disruption.
Thanks.
That's a great question, Kris. I think I would just turn it back to everyone in the room. Like, what do we need to do to find our comfort, right? Nikki created Weems so that Black women could feel comfortable in the room. And it felt so good. It was wonderful the first time we all met. And so I think about it. I think about how, what do I need to give up in order to disrupt a capitalist system that is just based on money and the benefits to certain corporations? How, what do we all have to give up to be in a place and let other people feel comfortable? People who have consistently felt uncomfortable, unwelcome, right? So I think that's really the question to ourselves. Like, how do we make other people feel comfortable? How do we sit in our own discomfort and power through it?
Fair enough. And I love what you said, because it's that binary approach, and you're right, like Nia brought it up, and we do have to get away from that either or, the yes, no, or it's good, it's bad and stuff, and start thinking about what those spaces are in between and around that area to really kind of create both that disruption and I think that paradigm shift across the board.
So speaking of disruption, let me just suggest to people that we're facing a really interesting situation now on the East Coast. As you know, in an effort to deal with the disruptive effects of climate change, the current administration wants to put a few hundred, if not a few thousand, wind turbines off the east coast of the U.S. In order to do this, they're going to have to, under the current regime, jump through a whole lot of environmental law hoops that may slow this process down for years and years. There are already 6 different lawsuits pending in Boston and DC, for example. And the question becomes, do we need, if we're going to have a green transition in order to deal with climate change and deal with the problems of the oceans, do we need a whole set of new green laws that somehow, shall we say, are a little more efficacious in terms of getting us where we need to go? It's just a really interesting and highly disruptive question that it's occupying the law professors on the listserv right now, I just say. So.
I'm going to say we probably need some blue laws, not just the green laws. We actually need to think about the blue laws that we need in place. I'm going to ask one final question. So I have to say, I was on a podcast recently, and somebody said that they asked me if I was optimistic about the future of the planet, and I have to say I paused. And I said, I thought about it a little bit more, and I said, yeah, I'm hopeful. And I think I have a distinguishing between hopeful and optimistic. And my hope comes from the fact that if we take action, things will be better, versus optimism, I think, kind of maybe pushes things a little bit further out for me. And I'm hopeful when I think of individuals, especially folks in the younger generation, that are really looking at economics differently, looking at business development differently, and looking what's going on with climate change and needing to take action. So I do actually have a lot of hope at a local and a state level that there's innovations taking place, and hopefully from that we can go broader. I'd love to hear kind of where you are. So I'm not going to ask if you're optimistic or hopeful. I'm just going to ask kind of where's your feeling right now, and where do you want to try to propel us to go forward in the future?
That's a really great question. I struggle with it all the time, and I have a 12-year-old and a 10-year-old, so when I see them, I have to be hopeful. I think it really depends on personally, it depends on where I am, so it goes back to that question of self-reflection and thinking, how do we navigate this discomfort or this space? And thinking, okay, so in what space do I feel hopeful? And in what space? And then what are the things I need to do in order to follow those spaces? Right? So I was at our oceans in Palau. I felt very hopeful there. And then when I feel stuck, when I'm in places that are just not moving, when I hear more of the same, then it's a little bit harder. And so the decision, I think, is just go to the beach more, go to the coast more, be in places where you do feel hopeful, because that's what's going to get change done.
Yep. Hey, Steve, did you?
I also have a very tricky relationship with hope. When I think about the future in terms of ocean and coastal and Great Lakes conservation, I also share what Dr. Nikki Traylor Knowles expressed. She said she was fearful that there are so many Black and Indigenous people with amazing ideas, but those ideas are not given the power that they need to succeed. So I share that fear and that anxiety about the future. But I was reading the work of an abolitionist. Their name is Miriam Kaba, and they talk about how hope is not an emotion, but more a discipline. So it's a discipline that you can practice. It's a discipline that you can cultivate if you have that determination. So I'm personally optimistic about our ability to cultivate the discipline of hope.
I love that. Steve?
It's so wonderful. I really like that. Well, again, not to be a lawyer here, but I tend to search for things that we can do, and they do tend to give me hope. I mean, just for example, we were talking before the show about, there are lots of small towns in North Carolina. I teach at Duke, who are suffering serious sea level rise and ocean climate kinds of issues. They lack the people to even apply for the grants to get the federal money to help them. I mean, that's something we can do something about. We can actually do something about, and you have a clever idea for that, where you basically, it involves passing the money through an NGO. But in any event, there are things that can be done. And when I look at the landscape and I see the problems, but I also see things that we can do, and those are the kinds of things that get me energized and make me hopeful.
Yeah, exactly. A board member said something to me yesterday that's really stuck with me and thinking. He talked about following impact. What he likes to do is follow impact until he gets to the next point where then he can figure out where he follows that next level of impact that took place. And that was something actually yesterday that gave me a lot of hope. If I think about how do I follow the impact? How do I, say again, how do I give more back than what I actually take away too, which is something I really enjoyed. I can't thank you guys enough for your insights and perspectives. I think coming away from this conversation, both with all the speakers and with this groups, is the thing you realize is the work that we're doing involves civil rights, it involves nature rights, it involves corporate governance. So this is a really big tent in terms of as we think about what do we need to do in the future. There's so many different angles that we need to approach this from and so many different actions that we really need to take going forward. And I thought our speakers and you all really helped kind of drive that home. So I really want to thank you for that. And I think if this opening plenary is an indication, we're going to have some amazing discussions during the course of CHOW. So we're going to reconvene back here at 11 a.m. For our next panel, which is about fishing, swimming, drinking, and why clean water matters. So we'll pick up on some of the conversation I think that Steve had about where we need to even do more with our Clean Water Act. So thank you guys very much for joining us, and we'll see you at 11.